Good evening. Welcome, welcome. Well, this class has a wonderful feeling to it. We started, the very first official Miracle Self class was the Finished Kingdom. And so revisiting this truth is very special. So welcome, welcome. And we have students from France, from Germany, from Australia, from the UK, the US, Canada, on the line. So welcome to all of you. Just after our last class finished, we opened the French doors here. Beautiful sunny day. And Jesse loves to go and lie out there. He finds some shade to lie in. So he went out, this was about midday, went out, saw his own shadow and lay down in it, thinking this is a nice shady spot to spend my afternoon in. And we saw this and laughed our little socks off, because what a wonderful metaphor for seeing that which we believe to be our fulfillment, and actually it is nothing of the sort. So sweet Jessie truly is our teacher virtually every day. And isn't that just what we do? We look out there, we say, yes please, I'll have some of that. That'll make my life better, more fulfilled, easier. And then we go chasing after that. We are forever, if we do such a thing, chasing shadows. And we all know it, those shadows, even if for a moment satisfy, as they did for a very short moment for Jesse, until he lay down in it and it had disappeared. The things we chase fulfill us perhaps for a moment, but then they're gone and they prove themselves to be very temporal, not real at all, and we're having to start all over again. So let us once and for all understand what we are, what our kingdom is, what experience is truthfully. And then in that, and as that truthful understanding, we are free in truth, never again chasing shadows, never again needing to, because all we have now is truth. So let's have a minute together and then start on this wonderful journey together. I live and move and have my being as and in God. That may well be, when we understand it, one of the most revealing and freeing statements of truth we've ever heard. I live and move and have my being as and in the experience of God. So let's break it down a little. I live as and in God. Break it down more. I live as God and in God. I move as God and in God, in the experience of God. I have my being as God and in the experience of God. If we understood that, we truly would need no more truth. Because it's telling us that there is only God. It's telling us that our being is God. The very I of us is God. It's telling us that God is living itself as I, as being. And all of experience is God. All the movement, everything I am in, even my thought, I'm in my thought. Well, the only presence, the only being, the only activity is God. Therefore, even thought is nothing but God. And that's very important to know right there. Even thought is God. Why? Because there is nothing but God. And so, do you see, if we really knew, or let's say, if we really believed, or can right now, this hour, get ourselves to a point of believing that we live and move and have our being as God, because there isn't any other way of living and moving and having being, because God is the only being, God is the only period. And we live and move and have our being in God, in the experience that is God, again, because God is the only, there isn't any other experience to have. There's no choice. Then all our thinking would be God thinking. All our pondering, all our awareness, all our desire would be for nothing but God. More God awareness. Because we would know that God is all there is about us, that God is all there is about our experience and absolutely everything in it and of it and happening as it. And therefore we would soon figure out that if we realized more of God, or became more aware of the infinity that is our very being and our very experience, then we would have more of it as experience. We'd soon figure it out. If we kept on singing, I live and move and have my being as and in God. Keep that song singing 24 hours a day. And you watch what opens up as your senses, as your awareness, as your desire. If that's the case, then I desire more and more of the awareness of that which I am, which is infinity and omnipresence. And what is it? God. And what is God? God is spirit. Aha! I must be spirit only. And indeed I am. If God is all, then every moment and every grain and step and breath of my experience must also be God. And what is God? Spirit. Therefore my experience must be spirit and spiritual. Aha! And indeed it is. Therefore, if I want more of experience, and we should back up actually, we surely by now know that God is good and good alone. So therefore I am good and good alone, and my experience is good and good alone. My world and everything in it and of it, despite appearance, is good and good alone because it's God and God alone. Therefore, if I want more of the good that is the infinity of me and the infinity of my experience and everything in it and of it, then I should just become more aware of that infinity that I am and the infinity that my world is. There it is, there's the secret. And we become filled with that sense and filled with that desire when we know that only God is. When we still do not know it, we're off chasing shadows. And those shadows, just like they did for Jesse, as soon as he lay down in it, disappear, prove themselves to be nothing, prove themselves to be at best temporal, frail, soon to let us down, very often soon to turn round and bite us. But truth is real, truth is eternal, truth is only good and eternally good. Truth gives the whole of itself to that being who knows that they are truth and nothing but truth. In experience, God seeks us. Just like water seeks the hole and pours itself down that hole. You know what happens when you are ready to let the tub water out through the drain. You pull the plug, and instantly all the water in the tub seeks that hole and rushes down the hole. You know what happens if we remove the dam. Trillions of gallons of water instantly rush at that opening, at that hole. And in this very way, when we know that we are God and everything of us is God, everything without exception, again, because there isn't anything but God, so that's easy to remember. Everything is God because there isn't anything but God. There it is. How difficult can that be? And then, when we are a vacuum, when we are an emptiness, in other words, we've stopped using our senses to try to attract God, attract good, realize God, but just when we know that we are already God, we are already the whole of the spiritual kingdom, fully manifested, demonstrated, visible, tangible, real, because that's again all that God is. When we realize this, even when we begin to have a grain of that realization and then get still so that that which is can become evident to us, which is the way that that which is does become evident to us, then we're like the water now without its dam, or the water in the tub now without a plug. And that water, that God, and the whole of it, fully manifested and demonstrated already, rushes in what appears to be an experience through our empty consciousness, revealing itself all over our kingdom as our kingdom. Actually, there it is. Should we stop there? That's it. All done. I live and move and have my being utterly, totally, infinitely, without exception, as God and in God. I can't escape God because there is nothing but God. This is a spiritual kingdom. And as we've heard before, we really shouldn't say this is a spiritual kingdom because that suggests there are other types of kingdom. There aren't. This is the kingdom. There isn't another, and there isn't another type, and there isn't a lesser or higher degree of it. There is just the kingdom. And that kingdom is God, Spirit, the incorporeal. And because God is complete, and I'm hearing that maybe some of us don't know that. God is complete. Should we go through that quickly? God is complete. How do we know that God is complete? Well, God is one. Let's go through the whole reasoning why God is complete. God is one, only one. Right there, we understand why God is complete. One is one. Throughout all of itself, it is one, and the whole of that one. At every point of one, there is the whole of one. There isn't two. There isn't different parts or departments or categories or types of one. There's only one. So one can't be partly complete and partly incomplete, or a little bit complete and mostly incomplete. One is one and fully one. Yes or no? Does that make sense? Well, that is God. God is one. God is the one. Again, there isn't two. There is only one. And that one has only itself everywhere within it and as it, and nothing but, because there cannot be anything but. There isn't anything to make a but with. There's only oneness and the whole of oneness. Fully complete and finished, whole, visible, tangible, as that one. God is omniscience, and omniscience isn't anything like our sense of intelligence or faculty of intelligence. Omniscience is divine intelligence. Omniscience is more than omniscience. Omniscience is greater than the word omniscience. We can't capture what omniscience is. But just for the moment, realize that omniscience is the highest intelligence that ever is and ever can be. And that doesn't even come close to understanding what omniscience is. But just for the moment, realize that. Now tell me, is it intelligent to be incomplete? You can't have incomplete intelligence, because that isn't very intelligent. And you most definitely cannot have incomplete omniscience. If there were incomplete omniscience, that means that there is a part of omniscience that isn't actually omniscient, but is a little dumb, because it isn't fully omniscient. It's lacking in omniscience. Well, how can the one, which is omniscience and fully omniscience, lack in omniscience? Any more than one can lack in one. It's of course nonsense and totally impossible, totally untrue. Then we bring in omnipresence and realize that the whole of God is fully present at every point of itself at the same time. And the whole of God is omniscience. So here we now know that omniscience is omnipresent. So now tell me where there is a lack of omniscience, meaning there is a lack of completeness, a lack of the whole of God fully aware of itself, fully visible, tangible, manifested, demonstrated, available, of course. In fact, more than available, because before anything could be sensed as needing to be available, it's already here. Before I call, before you call, I have answered. Before you call, I am. Before you even take a thought, I am. I am way before thought, way before any realization, way before any sense of needing needing omniscience, needing omnipotence. I'm already here, closer than your breathing, closer than your thought, closer than your whole sense of being and world. I am. We could carry on, but we don't really need to, do we? Right there, just with those three aspects of truth, which is oneness, omniscience, and omnipresence, there we have the proof, the truth, that God is fully God at every point of itself simultaneously, and it is an absolute impossibility, a ludicrous impossibility to believe that anywhere or anything or any being at any time, at any place, can lack God, can be incomplete in God. needing more God. It's an absolute, ludicrous impossibility and an absolute untruth. And so here we have it already, that only God is, therefore all being, all of experience, all of the kingdom, all of the universe is God, and only God, there is none else. And God is spirit, and spirit is one and omniscient and omnipresent, and therefore there is no place, no time, no being that isn't spirit, that is being the fullness of its oneness, its omniscience, the whole of itself fully complete and fully visibly, tangibly complete, fully manifested and demonstrated. There's no unmanifest God or undemonstrated God or invisible or intangible God. It's utterly and ludicrously impossible to believe such a thing. And so here we have the truth that this is we are the spiritual kingdom living as its spiritual being, or we are the spiritual being living as its spiritual kingdom, there being none else. And the spiritual kingdom is forever complete and whole. The whole of God, the whole of Spirit, the whole of the kingdom. And don't be afraid of using words like earth or universe or form or thing or being. They're all the same thing, they're God. Remember, come back to our primary statement, at least for this class, which is, I live and move and have my being as and in God. There's none else. So, when we use other words, don't be afraid of doing so, we realize that in using those words, what we really mean is God. It doesn't matter what thing we're naming, it's actually God. It doesn't matter what activity, what amount, what form, what being, what place, what condition we're naming, actually it is God. Because there's none else. So, the whole of the kingdom, the whole of the earth, the whole of the universe, the whole of the infinite, the whole of God, the whole of all life, the whole of all infinity, the whole of all form, the whole of all activity, the whole of all good in and as every form, every being, is always not only right here where you are, the whole of life, amount, all of form, all of activity, all of being, all of love is not only right here where you are. I wish you would take that statement and meditate with it until you never ever seek for anyone or anything again. Because you don't need to. If you do, you're chasing shadows. So take that statement, certainly, and bless yourself with it, singing in your mind 24 hours a day. But not only is it right here where you are, it is you. There is no life but you. Your world is you, magnified in experience. When a lighthouse peers out and sees all this beautiful light, where is that light coming from? What is it? It's all coming from and is itself the lighthouse. Without the lighthouse beaming forth its being, its light, there is no light to experience. And in this very way, without us being here, there is no mind, there is no body, and there is no universe. There is no earth. There is no other being. There is no plant, flower, fruit, dollar, car, house, neighborhood, country, world, at all. You are it. I am the life. I am the bread. I am the form. I am the amount. I am the activity. Without me, without you, literally, the you experience and the world you experience isn't here. Literally. You are the fullness of your experience. Now, the key to understanding the spiritual kingdom, the finished kingdom of spirit, the only thing there is, the only life there is, the only amount, the only form there is, the only activity there is, place there is, the only expression there is, the only business there is. The key to realizing the finished kingdom is to realize that spirit is that kingdom, and to realize that spirit is incorporeal. The moment we affix our attention on form as being something of its own self, we're chasing shadows. We're believing in that which of its own self is nothing, is a shadow. And so the key, the entire key, and we will explore this, and we will also explore why the students, for even the last 100 years of beautiful contemporary teaching, have not understood and not been able to witness the wholeness and completeness and free-flowing infinity of life. But the key is to withdraw from that which seems to be. All of it. Starting with a thought. Withdraw from thought as being something real, something of its own self. Withdraw from body as being something real, as being something of its own self. Its own presence, its own form, its own shape, weight, colour, organ, function, height. Withdraw from the whole thing. Weight. Forget it. Gender even. Withdraw from gender. It's all a sense of the whole of being and the whole of body which we actually are. It's a concept of body. It is not the real one body. So withdraw from it as being real, as being something of its own self, and then withdraw from the whole world of hims and hers and its, amounts, activities, places, conditions, as being something of their own selves, as being something real, even temporarily real that we have to deal with today. Withdraw from it. It's just like Jesse's shadow. All of it. It isn't real. And because it isn't real, and because even our temporal experience, this human temporal experience, however long or short that seems to be, doesn't really matter at all how long or short it seems to be. What does matter is that we're having it. And even while we're having it, it of its own self isn't real. And because it isn't real, it isn't needed. And that means we don't need anything of it of its own self. And interestingly and beautifully and miraculously, we don't need anything of it of its own self. And yet, when we withdraw from it of its own self and stop the nonsense of chasing its shadows, then we find ourselves full of all the good forms of experience. But as Paul in the Bible said. We must lose our life in order to gain it. We must lose our belief in life as we have believed it to be, and this includes everything of life as we have believed it to be. Everything. We must lose the belief in our breath and our heartbeat and our organ and our function, our safety and protection of our body, our health, nutrition of our body. We must lose the belief in dollars. We must lose the belief in family, in colleagues, in business, in world, in country, and everything in and of it. And realize that actually, despite appearance and despite the logical sense of course, needing the good things of the world and the good things of life, as we can describe them. Of course, logically, we definitely need these things, and we need a good measure of them, and a natural flow of them, and the better the measure and the more natural and easy the flow of the good things of life, the better life is. Of course, logically, it seems as if this is the case. But we must lose our life in order to gain real life. Real life, here and now, appearing as this very world that we're in here and now, and yet the truth of it. And so we must realize that everything of life that we have believed is real. Everything of us that we have believed is us, is real, is actually nothing more than Jesse's shadow. It's a belief about what actually is life, and what actually is this world, and what actually is everything, everywhere in it and of it. So we must withdraw from the whole of life as we know it. And we must realize that actually what this life is, every single bit of it, and every form and every place, activity, every breath of it is spirit, which is incorporeal, which doesn't have anything that we can name in it whatsoever, is pure God. And interestingly and beautifully and miraculously, as we do that, and we now seek only the finished kingdom of God, of spirit, of the incorporeal, and as we rest in that finished kingdom, and we're now able to rest more and more because we realize that this indeed is the finished kingdom. And even as I look out at my thought and my body and my world, and it may appear that I need various aspects of good to come along and help me fulfill life, actually that is pure, false sense. And actually what I am and I have this very second and forever is the finished kingdom of God. And when I realize that, and I'm able evermore to sit in it and let the finished kingdom get on with being the finished kingdom as what I am and my world is, then in that way I've lost my life, I've lost my belief in form as being something in and of its own self, and I've found God, I've found truth, and I now rest in truth. And in that rested state, where we're not now seeking anything, but we're only seeking God for God, we discover that our form of life is full and beautiful, and freely full and beautiful. Fulfilled form in every way. Fulfilled life, fulfilled body, fulfilled dollars, fulfilled expression. Every single being that is part of that experience of fulfillment, we suddenly discover walking right into our life. Every necessary resource we suddenly discover is always at our feet, at every step, around every corner, every day. And if for 5 days or 50 days we look at our experience and there doesn't seem to be the fulfillment of resource, we'll discover that we don't need it this day or these 50 days, and yet the very day we do, it's all there. We don't need a stockpile of the formations of good because Spirit doesn't have any formations. Spirit isn't of matter. Spirit doesn't have matter. Spirit doesn't have anything material in it. Spirit is what materiality actually is. And even if there seems to be a gaping hole in materiality, actually there isn't. The whole of God is right there. And we'll discover that it, as the very needed resource of form, is always right there when it is needed. Always. If we stop seeking the form, if we've died to the belief that we need form, that our life consists of form, our life is sustained, maintained, fulfilled by form, forms of life, forms of health, forms of wealth, forms of safety, security, love. If we will stop that nonsense, then we've stopped the nonsense of trying to find somewhere to lie down in a shadow that's actually ours. And we will seek God alone, and as we seek God alone, we have all of God as every place, every condition, every step, as fulfilled form. The finished kingdom is what you are and what you have this very moment, and you don't need a single thing of it. It's already here. You can't possibly shake yourself free of the whole of it being what you are and what you have right here. And the moment you realize that actually everything of the formation of experience, or even simpler, everything of experience, is actually, despite the way it appears to be, God. And then you realize that God is Spirit, and the whole of Spirit is the only option. It's the only thing you can possibly have. You can never be short of Spirit. You always are and have the whole of Spirit as you then seek that alone and let that alone pour through you. Then you will discover that God seeks you very, very quickly as all the good and fulfilling form of every single category of life and of expression. Nothing can hinder you when you are what you truly are, and that is God being. And when you know that your whole world is what it truly is, and that is God. Nothing can hinder you. God doesn't hinder, God fulfills. I am come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Not I am come so that you can suffer, so that you can be hindered at every other step, so that you have to toil and sweat for every ounce of good, so that you have to run off to hospitals every year to get your health checked and your health saved, or your health, your life elongated. No, I am come into your awareness that you may have everything I am. Here and now, you are everything I am, and as you wake up to the truth that you are Spirit and nothing but Spirit, and therefore the whole of Spirit, then you have in experience everything I am. So the key right now is to realize all of this. It's very simple, really. We've just been exploring it a little, but it's really very simple. You are and have the finished kingdom because there isn't any other type of kingdom. The finished kingdom of you and your world is the only kingdom. And that kingdom is God, Spirit, and Spirit is always complete and whole and infinite and omnipresent. Realize that. Stop chasing shadows. Seek God and God alone, and then be still and let God, let the finished kingdom reveal itself in your awareness. And every minute you spend realizing that the only you there is and the only earth there is and the only everything everywhere there is the finished kingdom, and it's whole and complete at every step and breath, And then every minute you let in your silence the finished kingdom get on with being the finished kingdom. As its light shines through as you, magnifies your awareness, then there is everywhere about more of that finished kingdom that forever is, now tangible in and as your awareness. But it's been there all the time, but now you're aware of it, and there's the key. Now you can see. Whereas I was blind, now I can see. Whereas my consciousness or my awareness was dark, because I thought that the forms of life were real unto their own selves, now I realize that they are not real in and of their own selves. Only God is, and God is everywhere, and God is finished and complete, and that's what I am, and that's what this whole earth is. Now that I realize that, I rest in the awareness that all I need to do is let truth itself magnify my awareness of the truth I am and the truth I have. That's all. And you can't do it, I can't do it, Jesus can't do it. I of my own self am nothing. It is the Father within me that does these great works. Yes, it's the Father within, the truth within, the finished kingdom within, the water within the dam that does the great works of rushing through that dam when we take the dam away. It's the water within the tub that does the works of racing down the drain when we take the plug away. Well, taking the dam away and the plug away is removing our belief from form as being something of its own self. There's the plug, there's actually the dam. And it's holding the whole of God from full experience. Isn't that interesting? Even more interesting, the whole of God is already and forever everywhere about. But we cannot see it. We cannot see form or experience form as God, meaning as fulfillment, as complete and whole everywhere about, because we're damming that vision out. We're damming it shut by our belief in form being something of its own self. As soon as we remove that belief, the dam is crumbled. And God rushes in, revealing itself all over the land. The land of milk and honey is suddenly visible and tangible and omnipresent. It's all a matter of awareness, of truth being all. And then with that awareness, it's then all a matter of letting truth get on with being truth as itself, for itself, as you. And you will discover then that God rushes into your experience and as your experience so rapidly that your mind and your body and your world is filled with the good that's always been there but is now visible. If I dressed up as a holly bush and knocked on your front door, you may be utterly confused. First of all, how can a holly bush be knocking on my front door? And how can that holly bush have the gall to invite himself in for dinner? Because that's what I'm doing. I'm knocking on your front door, dressed as a holly bush, inviting myself to dinner. If you believed that appearance, can you imagine, number one, your reaction? Can you then imagine your whirlwind of activity in trying to deal with a holly bush knocking on your front door, inviting itself to dinner? You are in utter confusion, are you not? However, can you equally see that if you knew that it was me dressed as a holly bush, you would laugh it off and say, Paul, stop being ridiculous, get out of that holly bush suit and come to dinner. Or you may, of course, turn me away and tell me to find my own dinner. But one way or the other, you wouldn't be confused about a holly bush knocking on your door. Now, this is exactly how we are not to be confused about appearance. The only thing that ever presents itself to you or knocks on your door is God. And God takes on as experience, or better stated, God is as experience an infinite multitude of form, of shape, of colour. If we believe that form, anything or everything of it, to be real in and of its own self, then we are doing nothing better, I can assure you, than believing that holly bush knocking on the front door, or Jesse believing that he's found a shadow and immediately lying down in that shadow. We really have believed, despite the truth being given us 4,000 years ago by Gautama, and then 2,000 years ago again by Jesus, and then hence, every century since, we've had wondrous truth given us from all the spiritual masters, all the prophets, all the mystics throughout the ages. Every century has them. And we've been told the very same thing by each and every one of them. And we were told it in our beautiful contemporary Joel Goldsmith, and we're now being told it again through the Miracle Self. But what has always interested me, because I've known that the only reason for the Miracle Self teaching is not to give the world another teaching, we do not need another one, but to bring an ever greater clarity and simplicity to truth. You've heard me say that from the very beginning. And so, that being the purpose of the Miracle Self, I am forever hunting in the teachings of the past to find out why we didn't get this. And I was one of them. Don't ever let's forget that. Why? If we can pinpoint that reason, and then we can present truth in a really simplified and clarified way, then the masses of us who are hearing this today are free, and free very, very quickly. And so that is what drives me. Virtually every day I'm delving in the old teachings, trying to find out why. So with this silly example of the holly bush and the belief in form to be something of its own self, it actually will prove not to be so silly, because we'll remember it and realize that everything we see, hear, taste, touch, smell and think about, if we are believing it of its own self, then we're doing nothing better than believing me dressed up as a holly bush and really trying to somehow deal with that holly bush. We're doing nothing better. So remember that forever now. All is God. All is the finished kingdom of God. And because God is all, it means that all of you and all of your experience and every grain of it is actually, despite appearance, finished. The holly bush, despite appearance, is Paul. Despite appearance, everything is God. And because of that truth, everything is forever whole and complete. There is not one grain or one breath or one person or one activity or one condition or place lacking or limited or separate from anything of its utter completeness in experience. Nothing. Nothing is ever missing. Not a single being, not a single breath, not a single dollar, not a single customer, client, patient, student, not a single condition, place, activity is ever missing from any minute of experience or any place of experience. Why? Because that experience actually is God. If you like, God dressed up as what appears to be this, whatever it is that we're experiencing or doing. It's God dressed up. More than that, the very form itself is nothing but the whole of God. And because of that, it means that the whole of fulfillment, the whole of oneness is this very experience, this very activity, this very place. The whole. Nothing is ever lacking. No one is ever lacking. Nothing of awareness, nothing of wisdom, nothing of form, nothing of resource, nothing of activity, nothing of idea, nothing of truth is ever missing from anything at all, any place, any minute, any condition, at all. So, the finished kingdom is the only kingdom, the only being, the only experience. All right, now, we had a couple of examples of how we can easily be very, very confused by listening or reading a truth message, such as the miracle self, and such as Joel, and such as Jesus or Buddha, or any truth message, if we isolate any one passage without having spiritual discernment, or without having the spiritual discernment which enables us ourselves to add to that which seems to be wrong, or seems to be lacking, or seems to be out of tune with the whole of truth. So here's one. It's from Joel. In doing this, I hope you realize that Joel was my teacher. Without Joel, I am so sure I wouldn't be here in truth. I'm so sure I wouldn't have found my truth all those years ago, and I'm absolutely sure that the miracle self wouldn't be here. So let's please first understand that I'm never ever criticizing Joel. I could equally go into the miracle self teachings and find the very same examples, and I hope you do, and I hope you bring the spiritual discernment to those examples. But in any teaching, if we isolate one little passage without spiritual discernment, we can very, very easily get lost and totally confused, as was my case. And so I'm giving you this example so that we can bring it to the surface and understand really what is being meant. Also, before we hear this, let's understand that Joel absolutely had the whole of truth and practiced and lived the whole of truth. So we have to bring our own spiritual discernment to any isolated passage. Here is one of those passages. The omnipresence of God you must accept. Then you ask, if God is omnipresent, what is the explanation for so many catastrophes? The proven answer is the activity of God, the presence of God, and the power of God is functioning only where God is realized. Therefore, in the absence of the realization of God, God is not functioning. I was talking with a beautiful friend this morning, very beautifully high in spiritual awareness, and we were talking about this. Now, Joel knew what he was meaning, but I've got all my original Joel books, and if ever you come here, and at times you're most welcome to come here when we have another retreat here, but don't dress up as a holly bush, otherwise I might not recognize you. Then you're very welcome to look in those Joel books of mine, and you will find that there is a lot of underlining and asterisks all over the place. And I used to make marks in the margins of the page if there was something confusing. And I would start studying this and trying to relate it to other aspects where I typically underlined, sometimes many times, and put asterisks all over the margins, because there I found a beautiful and fully present explanation of truth, and it was highly inspiring and freeing. So I have all the marks, and they help me now to go back to the books and find out those areas that were confusing to me before I had my healing, before I'd finally lifted into a true realization of the finished kingdom and let it live me. And by the way, there it is. There's the healing of anything and everything that you may be suffering with or struggling with. So anyway, I did this in readiness for tonight, and I found this passage we've just read. Now, listen to this. In the absence of the realization of God, God is not functioning. Now, where does that leave us? I'll tell you where it left me. I had no idea how to realize God. I didn't know what it meant. How do I realize God? What do I have to do? What do I have to know in order to fulfill the realization of God? So here I am at the time in great bodily pain with disease and great lack in other areas of life, thinking now that if I can't realize God, God is not functioning in my life. And I'll tell you, that was very depressing for me. It isn't true. If it were true, it would mean that I am a greater power than God, because my lack of realization is making God dysfunctional or unfunctional, not functioning in my experience. So somehow I have stopped God. Is that true? Is that possible? Of course it isn't. If God is all, God is infinite, God is omnipresence, God is the only power, omnipotence, God is the only intelligence, wisdom, mind, awareness, omniscience, then how can first of all, there isn't anything else. But even if there was something else, it would have to be a greater power than God, that is omnipotence and omniscience and omnipresence, in order to stop God functioning as experience. Stop God functioning in the kingdom. Well, I'll tell you, this kind of thing, this very kind of thing, confused me for 20 years. On one page, I found, and not only how beautiful Joel, but in Jesus and in Isaiah and in all of them. All of them. And I'm sure if we go ploughing through the miracle self, we find it just as much there, if we isolate something and try and understand truth in that isolated paragraph or sentence. Not only that, but then it would take my realization in order to make God functional. Can you see the untruth in that statement? Now, what Joel meant, but it isn't said in that isolated paragraph, but it is said in many, many other places throughout Joel, what he meant is that God is not functional in experience. God doesn't seem to be functional. That's what's meant, and that is the truth. Individual experience isn't experiencing the function, the presence, the fully fledged and complete and manifested presence that is God, the only presence and the already presence. Individual being doesn't experience God if we individually are believing form to be something in and of its own self, instead of realizing what it really is. And that word realizing in this case just means knowing what really is, and that is God and God alone. Now, in other places, and I picked out one of those other places just before class, it says this in Joel's writings. The spiritual path demands complete purity, and by purity is meant an absolute conviction that God is the only power there is. There are no other powers. And let me tell you, therefore, a lack of realization of God is not a power. And this is me speaking now. And absolutely is incapable of stopping God functioning. There is no power, therefore no presence, no function, no form, no manifestation, no experience other than God, because God is the only presence, the only power. Let's carry on with Joel. Omnipotence, which means all power, is spiritual. And if omnipotence is spiritual, then neither material nor mental powers can be power. To perceive that is to prevent not only the individual, the group, or the universal belief from functioning in our experience, but also to begin to destroy it for the whole world. Now, if we isolate just this paragraph, we have the most wondrous and pure truth that we can ever be given. If we isolate the previous paragraph, we're lost and we don't know where to start, and we don't know how to start. So, for this class, I want to make sure that you understand what we've heard for the first, 20, 30 minutes of the class. Only God is, and God is spiritual, and spirit is finished, complete, and God is the only presence, the only power. God is omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience, fully complete, despite appearance. You are, this very minute and forever, the whole of the finished kingdom. And that means the whole of God is right here as you and as your whole experience. As you look out at experience, you're seeing nothing but God. You're experiencing nothing but God. Just in the same way as you might open the door and experience a holly bush standing there. If you believe it, you're lost. But if you know what it really is, you're free. And this is what we must do with God. If we look out at experience and believe it to be something of its own self, we're lost. We're chasing shadows, we believe in shadows, we think we need shadows, we make effort to gain those shadows or lose the bad ones. If we know what it is, we don't have to make any effort whatsoever, because we already have the whole of the finished kingdom, and we already are that finished kingdom itself. The very life we are, the very breath we breathe, the very body we walk around in, the very world we walk around in, is the finished kingdom of God. And that means that every step and breath and grain of it is complete and whole and perfect. But we must lose that belief in it in order to gain the fullness of it, the truth of it. We must come to God and God alone, the finished kingdom and the finished kingdom alone, the spiritual kingdom and the spiritual kingdom alone, realizing its onlyness, and then be still and let it be itself, as us, and then we will discover that it is now ever more visible and tangible and real as our very being and body and world and everything in and of it. And we will also discover that with that dam gone, that it forever seeks us. Good wisdom, good intelligence, good direction, good clarity, good life, good energy, vitality, intelligence, good wealth, good opportunity, forever seeks us. This morning on the phone, this question was asked. How do the students stay in God awareness, for instance, when they see an accident on the road? How is that not so disturbing that it causes reaction in the students? And the immediate effort to try to know truth and try to see the truth of what appears to be an accident as actually everyone being fine and unhurt and able to get up and brush themselves off and walk back into their lives. Because this is what the students struggle with. And that's true. And here's the answer, and it was very, very clearly given to us during and then onwards from class 6 of our last class, the 7 spiritual steps and beyond. God, truth, the finished kingdom, doesn't have thought. And because it doesn't have thought, it doesn't have the pairs of opposites. It doesn't have good versus bad in it whatsoever. It doesn't have matter in it whatsoever. It doesn't have human beings and human bodies in it whatsoever. It doesn't have automobiles and roads and crashes on them. Nor does it have good healthy bodies, plentiful dollars, roads with no crashes on them. The spiritual kingdom is full of only itself, spirit. And spirit doesn't think because there's nothing to think about. The spiritual kingdom is. And when something is, there's nothing left to think about. You can go off and think about that. God is omniscience. Well, tell me what there is to think about. Tell me what there is to talk about. If God is omniscience, which means you are omniscience and your whole world is omniscience, there's nothing to talk about. That's why silence is the ultimate truth. And silence is the ultimate visibility of truth. So spirit does not have the pairs of opposites. It is no use waiting until we experience something bad to start hurrying up with our truth awareness to try to fix that which seems to be bad and seems to be greatly in need of truth. That is just as ludicrous as an actor stepping onto the stage or the movie set completely unrehearsed and expecting to be able to perform his or her part. It's ludicrous. What we have to do is come into each day of life fully versed and rehearsed. If we don't come into life with the fullness of God awareness, which doesn't have any matter in it and therefore doesn't have any good or bad in it, but only spirit in it, only the finished kingdom of spirit in it and nothing else, only incorporeality in it and as it and of it and happening as it and nothing else, then we are such a poor actor. We come onto our stage or into our experience completely unversed. In other words, in Joel's words, we do not know the letter of truth. We don't know the truth. We're unversed and unrehearsed. We're not even ready. We're not even ready to walk into our day. We're not even ready to have a spiritual day. You see, when we come into our day fully versed and rehearsed, what that means is that we're in a good amount of God awareness and God awareness alone, which means, as practical experience, that we are always knowing God. We're not waiting for one pair Or maybe the other pair, we're not waiting for the bad to arrive before we quickly brush up our truth and try and then evidence it. And maybe we come across something that's just too good and we want to be rid of that amount of good. And so now we're trying to brush up on our truth to balance that too weighted good. We have to be rid of the whole pairs of opposites and be fully versed in God and rehearsed in God. And that rehearsed in God really means that we are practicing, in Brother Lawrence's words, the presence of God all the time, even when everything seems absolutely perfect. We're not happy with that, because if we are naming absolute perfection, then it isn't it. Remember Lao Tzu, if you can name it, it isn't it. If we can name good and we settle down and we think that everything's just fine, thank you, God, then we're in just as much trouble as if we experience something bad. And now we say, hey, God, I hope you're listening because I really need you quickly now. Bad has hit up on me. Both ends of the pairs of opposites are utterly out of truth. So please, for tonight, realize this. Realize that the only kingdom is the spiritual kingdom, and realize that the only presence, the only life, the only body, the only experience, the only form, amount, condition, place, activity is spirit and spiritual. Therefore, it has no matter in it whatsoever and has no need of matter whatsoever, and we'll get into this more. And therefore mustn't be in mind, mustn't be in our awareness, mustn't be entertained. What we have to entertain is God and God alone, even when everything is just beautifully fine as far as appearance goes. We have to realize that that beautifully fine appearance is still nothing of God in and of its own self, and therefore get on with versing ourselves in God. And that verse is really what we heard in the first 20 or 30 minutes of this class. So listen to that and then keep that alive in your awareness 24 hours a day. Keep on again and again withdrawing from the belief in anything at all being something of its own self and maybe needed or not needed, more of, less of, forget it. And verse yourself in God and God alone 24 hours a day. The finished kingdom 24 hours a day. And then, if you come across something which is obviously at one end of the pairs of opposites, like that accident, then you see, you come to that experience fully versed and rehearsed. And now it doesn't bother you. You know that that which is appearing right in front of you is not the truth, is nothing of its own self, and therefore doesn't need the truth in order to correct it. You come as the presence of truth, and as we've heard, where the presence of truth is, there is liberty. And you will literally watch this. We watch it all the time, and I've given you so many examples over the years, but we will literally watch car accidents or other types of accidents that look very, very nasty indeed, and yet the person or the people get up fine and brush themselves down and walk away, even though their car may be crumpled or their car may be upside down or their whatever the situation is may look very disastrous indeed. We literally watch people get up, brush themselves down and walk away, and they're fine. And we watch dollars and we watch harmony and we watch opportunity and expression and idea. Whatever it is that is the fulfillment of experience, rush to this very place where it seems to be needed, revealing itself as already there and perfectly ready for whatever is the fulfillment of the experience. So please, let's realize this right off the bat tonight, and then we can go beautifully and deeply into the spiritual finished kingdom of experience.